So I'm going to turn things over to Chris Jackson, who will introduce our next presenter.
Awesome. Thanks a ton, Karen. Hey, everyone. My name is Chris Jackson. For those of you whom I haven't met yet, I'm the Collegiate R&R Chair here in Pennsylvania, teach at Muhlenberg College. And it's my pleasure to introduce introduce you to Mr. Robert T. Gibson. He's a longtime friend and colleague who comes to us with a great variety of musical and educational experience. This presentation really came to be because of a 7-hour conversation that the two of us had one day back in the fall about the complex topic of diversity. I've had the pleasure of seeing Robert teach and interact with his students and have consistently been inspired by his openness and vulnerability, inclusivity, and high musical standards that he sets for himself and his students. As we met a few times in the fall to determine the best course for a virtual presentation like this, a couple of things became clear for the two of us. And I wanted to start by talking about some of these things. We are all forced to take a really good, hard look at ourselves this last year. With all that's happened in our country, from the pandemic to the critical moments of racial reckoning, and there's loads of work still to be done. Choral directors and educators have had to read and reflect on their practices. And throughout the presentation, I may interject into the chat some excerpts from one of the more profound readings that I came across as we were doing some research. It's an article by educators David Molk and Michelle Onona titled "Promoting Equity, Developing an Anti-Racist Music Theory Classroom." I'm going to throw this into the chat right now, and you can feel free to look at this later. But I will be putting some quotes from this into the chat occasionally because they relate perfectly to Robert's presentation. So there that is. I think the other thing that that I would say also is that we want this to be a conversation in certain ways. Robert and I spoke about a concern of his in presenting on this topic, and he really eloquently put it to me this way. We're all professionals here. We've all been working hard to change and better understand diversity, equity, inclusion this past year. And one of the questions that he posed to me, I think really spoke to his humility and also faith in his colleagues. But how am I going to offer anything new to this topic? And I think it's our hope that this presentation leaves plenty of space for conversation. You may have heard some of this in other information before. None of this may be a revelation, but with a topic as complex as diversity, it could help to hear something in a new way, or even to be inspired by the spirit with which someone like Robert approaches this topic. So if you have thoughts or questions throughout the presentation, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. I'm sure we'll find time at the end to address it, or it may be relevant in the middle, and we may find a good time to stop and discuss. So without much more from me, Robert, I was wondering if you minded talking about your musical background, your education, your performing background, or the various jobs that you've had as a musician, and how that's influenced your thoughts on diversity and what you're presenting today.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, first of all, thank you again, Chris, for allowing me to be here. And it's good to see some good friends. I see my friend Dustin Cates out there. Hey, Dustin. I want to start by saying I am originally from Houston, Texas, and I moved to Missouri for my master's. And I was actually I don't know what you call it, a Pennsylvanian. I don't know how you say it. I lived in Pennsylvania for 1 year. I actually lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I was a substitute teacher, and I also worked at Milton Hershey School for 1 year, teaching the gospel choir there. So that was a really cool experience. It was really cold, so, we got out of there. But I had a really great time there. So a little bit about my education background. I went to 2 performing arts middle schools and high school. So I went to Johnston Middle School back in the 2000-ish area, and that was a really cool experience for me. I was engulfed in music at an early age. So classical music started at 6th grade, as well as me taking over the gospel choir in 7th grade. So classical and gospel was a big start for me right at an early age. in high school, I went to the High School for the Performing and Visual Arts in Houston, Texas, and I was introduced to so many different genres, in addition to being a part of the YP, the Young Performers Group. And I was in the chorale. We did a lot of traveling, did a lot of various things. As a ninth grader or 10th grader, I got to hear Brahms, and I got to hear Mendelssohn, and I got to hear all of these different styles that I just didn't really understand, but I was like, that is really interesting. And I love that I got to understand that at a young age. So now, at 31 years old, there's some music that I just love, and there's some people who may have never heard of it, or it's considered something old that they don't really listen to. I went to North Texas for my bachelor's, graduated in 2012. Had the most wonderful time in North Texas. I can't describe all of the musical experiences and the musical friends that I made there. I think one of the biggest things is I got to do so much at North Texas. One of the things I was in the concert choir for 2 years, which was great. And then my last 3 years, I was in the a cappella choir, and we went to TMEA that year. We got to travel to Korea, and that was just an amazing experience. I was a part of the UNT Jazz Singers for 2.5 years. So this is where my infusion of jazz kind of came into my music. And I wasn't aware that jazz singers read and sung how they sang. And also, I wasn't aware that people who didn't look like me sang jazz. There were some Korean singers who sang jazz so well, and that just blew my mind. So grateful for that. I was a part of the UNT Gospel Choir for 5 years at North Texas, and I was in it for 2 years. I directed it for 3. Just awesome experience. Last big thing that I want to say about my education was I was in the UNT Collegium Singer. So I learned about Baroque music as a freshman, and I'm a Baroque lover. I just love listening to Baroque music. And that's not something that most people can say, that they just sit and listen to Baroque music for hours, but I do. So I'm really in love with Baroque music. I now teach at Missouri State University, where I received my master's, and I teach the Missouri State Gospel Choir as well as the Missouri State Multicultural Ensemble that I started. And I'll talk a little bit about how that group got started. I also work at Reed Academy. And there are 5 different choirs at Reed Academy. There's 6th grade choir, there's 7th grade women, there's 7th, 8th grade men's ensemble, there's the Reed Academy Singers who has been to national conferences and has done ACDA and ACDA Southwest and all these different things. So that's a little bit about my background. And as I said, I'm really excited to be here, excited to share my experiences and my goals. As I told Chris, I want to make this as interactive as possible. So there is a comment chat room. So if you have thoughts or, I'm from the Black church. So anytime we feel it, we just say it. So if you would like to comment and say, I agree, please say that. And I think that'll just be wonderful and lets me know that I'm on the right page here. So I think I have the ability to share my screen. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's see. I want to make sure, is my screen shared, Chris? Can you see it?
You're good, buddy.
Am I good? Awesome. Cool. Let's see. So the first thing, we're going to jump right in. I have just different pictures of what I found these on the internet, but just different pictures of what people will consider as diverse. So if you will take a minute, would you mind typing in the comments, what do you see? When you look at these pictures, what do you see? There's a picture of a South African choir. There's a picture of the multicultural group. There's a picture of some maybe high school or middle school choir. There's a South African choir. What are some things that you see? I want to read your comments. Yes, people love singing. I agree. Yes. Anybody else? What are some things that you see when you look at these pictures? Not all diverse groups, okay? Formal, I love that, yes. Movement, yes. Engagement. Yes. Oh, I love it. Expressive and energetic singers, yes. Amanda, I love that comment. Diversity within the individual choir. I love that. Energy, yes. There are a lot of different things that you can see when it comes to this topic of diversity. I want to go over something that I found, which is really interesting, on what diversity is. The definition I found, it's the inclusion of individuals representing more than one national origin, color, religion, socioeconomic, status, even sexual orientation. It goes way farther than that. Let's see. So there are 4 types of diversity that I found that I thought were really interesting. And just to give a kind of background before we dive into the different choirs that I teach. So the internal diversity, which are things that you cannot see or things that you are born into. And I won't go into all the detail about all the things. You can just read the slide, but these are some of the things that they said you're born into. So you're born into certain things like your national origin or your assigned sex or your gender or physical ability or mental ability. Those are things that it's said that you cannot control. Then you have things like external diversity, things that are seen. So your personal interests, your education, things that you are not born with, your religious beliefs. You're not born with those. You're taught those, right? Life experiences, things that you kind of learn over time. Then there is organizational diversity, which is difference between people sort of with work. So this is another type of diversity. The last one is a worldview diversity, which I thought was interesting because it kind of combines number 1 through 3. So it combines internal, external, and organizational. And this is kind of what makes worldview diversity. Here are a couple of points that I want to throw out right before we get started. I think it's important to know that diversity is more than just race. And I think a lot of times we get to a place where when we say it's diversity, it's about just having all the people doing one thing. And I think we can go deeper into that as educators and even as performers and people who program these things. It is more about the experiences we have that make us who we are. So I love about external diversity when it talks about life experiences, because we teach students on all different levels, whether the color they are, they may have come from a 2-parent background. They may have come from no parents. Maybe they, had to work at a young age. Maybe they've never had to work. So all of these experiences shape who they are. And I think once we can understand that who they are, that is what they're bringing to us. And it's our job to give them those experiences. As educators, we have the opportunity to give experience to students who may never get them. And I love that I get to share this story about the MSU Multicultural Ensemble. So, back in 2000, so I started my master's at Missouri State in 2015, fall of 2015. And I remember there were calls to the office asking they needed a group for Martin Luther King celebration. And so they called me and they said, hey, would you mind getting a group together? So I started with 7 people, one of them being my wife. And we got together and we sang an arrangement of Lift Your Voice and Sing, one that I had arranged. And then we did Right on King Jesus, something really simple. And after that, I was done. I was like, okay, they needed that, cool. But then the calls kept coming and they were like, who is that group? We've got to keep them. We've got to get them back. And so I said, okay. So I took the challenge. And the next year, we started to do more things. So I had a bigger group that had more people and more diversity in there. This was the second concert. The second concert was where we actually premiered the We Shall Overcome that was just published with Walton Music. You may have seen it with Dr. Jason Max Ferdinand and Aeolians as a virtual concert or a virtual presentation, which was amazing. So the 2 things I want to talk about, we got a chance to perform at the Missouri Music Educator Association, I should say the spring of 2019, actually. This ensemble, it consisted of a lot of different people. So it was about 40 singers, some of them being African-American, some of them being white, some of them being Korean, some of them being Hispanic. We got all of the people in there. Also, we did a program that was particularly either Black composers or subject matters that were dealing with racial issues. So we started the program off with Lovely Day by Bill Withers. Then we went to ACDA that I wrote, followed by History Has Its Eyes on You, musical theater by Lin-Manuel Miranda. And then we went to Make Them Hear You, which is from Ragtime, one of my favorite musicals. Next, going to Rise Up, Andra Day. And then we ended with Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Marvin Gaye. Now, that does not sound like a traditional program that anybody would program, but I thought it was so unique. Yes, I love Ragtime too, yes. I think it was so unique that we got a chance to do that, and that we got a chance to make that happen. And members of that group will never forget that experience because the music spoke through them and allowed them to become better musicians. I thought that was really important. A year later, in the spring of 2020, we did an ensemble. We did The Mass in Blue by Will Todd. If you've never heard that piece, oh man, it was just incredible to do. Here's the difference. The group was an all-white group. It was all white students and community members. And it was a 40-minute Latin mass, which was just different styles of jazz. So we had so many things going on, and it was amazing. And not only did we have the ensemble, we also had piano, we had drum set, we had a bass, we had a saxophonist, we had a jazz soloist, one of my best friends, Mahogany Medlock, that we flew in from Houston. And again, members of that ensemble will never forget that experience because the music spoke through them and allowed them to become better musicians. Now, I think sometimes people will say, well, the MMEA concert was considered diverse and the jazz concert was not. I think we have to look that both groups have diversity in the sense that the music is driving it and not just the look. So at the beginning, I asked you, what did you see in the pictures? As an educator, I'm beginning to go down the list of not just what I see, but what do I hear and what do I feel? Because when you hear music, you feel something. And I think that is the goal we should have. Our kids should feel something different when they start to sing music versus, oh, we see different people of color, so therefore we're good, and they don't have the same experience. I want to jump to Chris's question really quick, and I'm going to stop my share. Let's see. Here's a question. A diverse student population in the classroom is not a prerequisite for concern about diverse student experience. I think I'm gonna make my mission to challenge that. It's not just about it's not about the look of having one type of kid. So when I was in Pennsylvania and I did work at the Milton Hershey School, I had a lot of different kids doing gospel music. A lot of them were African American, but I had a lot of kids in there who were white. Some of them had never sang gospel before. Giving them a chance to sing a style that they had never sang, that was beautiful because you got to see it they got to embrace it, and the look of joy when they realize, wow, I'm doing something that I've never done before. So especially when you do not have a pool of people to come from. So if you are in a district where you only have white kids, or if you're in a district where you only have a certain type of kids, I think it is unfair to say, well, I have no diversity, because I think you can still give students an authentic experience once you give them certain music or different types of music that they can comprehend and understand, or music that's totally different that they go, wow, I've never thought I could do this, and they can handle it in such a good way. I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen, and now I'm gonna share some of the comments. I polled some people and I asked them for comments of what they thought about the performances. So from the performer's view and from the audience view, from some people from MMEA, they said, I was proud to be a member of something that was bigger than me. I had somebody say they had performed at MMEA 4 times, but that was their favorite performance. My favorite quote was, the emotional connection and interaction with the audience was life-changing. And then some people in the audience said, my choir, who attended the conference for the first time, was able to see a group that looked like them and sang songs they knew, which I thought was really, really awesome. When we go to the Mass in Blue, we had people who said it was the most challenging yet rewarding piece I'd ever worked on. And let me tell you, as a conductor, it was very challenging. I didn't think it was going to be that challenging, but yes, it was a lot. And I'm grateful that we were able to go on that journey together. I had an audience member say, I thought the concert was a teachable moment because it showed that real diversity, it showed what real diversity looks like, which is real diversity is not just the look. Real diversity is about the experience, what you hear and what you feel, and how that's going to bring you to a different place in your life. So I titled this slide "Two Worlds, One Family" because it's a song from one of my favorite Disney movie, Tarzan, and I just love Tarzan. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Before I do that, let me read this quote really quick. So it says, each of our students is a complex individual whose background, knowledge, social identity, and relationship to music and music education is unique. We can empower our students and encourage them to be active participants in their own education when we validate their musical experiences. I'm glad you brought that quote up, Chris, and that's something we're going to talk about having students be participants in their own education. I think we have not only the challenge of teaching them music, but also in allowing them to kind of gear where they want to go in their life, which I think is really, really important. So, two worlds, one family. I believe our world is, we're educators. We are, Bach and Brahms and Mozart and Mendelssohn, and every now and then we like, maybe some Patti LaBelle or some Aretha Franklin, in their world, I teach middle school. So I know that their world, they are still developing. They're still learning different things. And pop culture is a really big thing for them right now. So Ariana Grande and Travis Scott and Justin Bieber and Billie Eilish, who I thought was a boy at first until I saw her and I was like, oh, cool. And yeah, the kids laughed at me for that one, which is cool. I think our worlds have to collide, which is why the arrows are going from here to here. So we need to know what the students like. We need to know what they want to know. We need to know how they understand. And I think who we learn from. I think we should be able to learn from our students. What do our students need to learn? When do we let go? When do we let go and say, okay, I'm going to allow the students to learn from this? I'm going to read this quote that says, when students understand their teachers and teachers can relate to their students, this creates an atmosphere where learning has no limits. And I'm going to stop my camera really quick because I see a question that I want to answer. Hi, Joy. It says, having a diverse membership provides opportunities for dialogue that are not possible in a homogeneous group. Dialogue pushes participants to see and understand other points of view. Absolutely. I think that it's important, number one, to have dialogue. And we talk about this in one of my strategies as far as just having conversations about things that you are not aware of. This is not just conversations about music. This is conversations about a lot of different things. Yesterday, I'll be transparent. Of course, I know that there are a lot of LGBT students that I have in my classroom. And so at the end of school, I had 2 or 3 students in my room, and we just talked about their experiences and how they feel and what they believe. And it's not my place to say, you shouldn't feel like that, or you should do this. It's my position to listen and say, wow, well, thank you for sharing that. Kids are only going to share when they feel vulnerable. And I was really gracious to be in their presence to go, wow, you feel comfortable sharing all of this with me. And even as an educator for 5 years, that is still something that I think is amazing, because there's some students who don't share anything. One of the girls, she said that in choir class, I'm so intimidated to say anything. But it's funny because at the end of school, when the bell rings, she always comes to my desk and she's all ready to speak, So it shows me that there's a connection she has with me that says, I can share anything with you. And that just warms my heart. And I think for any educator, anybody who wants to just pour their life out to you, whatever it is. And I teach middle school, so it's not all the time PG. Sometimes it's not G. Sometimes I'm like, okay, let's rein that back in. But they want to share it all. And I'm here to listen to all of it. Thank you for saying that, Joy. I really appreciate that. Let's go back to this slide. And this slide says, which I think is very important, relationship first, teaching second. So teachers, we've been instructed to teach a music lesson for a certain period of time. So I know when I was at North Texas, my professor, Dr. Alan McCung, we were taught how to teach a 15-minute lesson. We were talking about physical development, and then, vocal development, and then rhythm, and then pitch, and then repertoire. And we learned this strategy that was great. And I thought it was wonderful. And then I got my first teaching job, and I was like, oh, okay. So when you have a school where, 50 minutes in the day, but you spend 20 minutes, having to learn people's names. You have to spend 20 minutes maybe dealing with discipline issues, because that's a thing in school. You spend 20 minutes, trying to, figure out why they're crying because they didn't tell you. You have to spend 20 minutes figuring out, okay, who are you again? Gotcha. Okay. So here is me. It's like we learn how to teach, but we don't know how to do. I call my students assorted drinks. So you have some waters, and you have some Sprites, and you have some Cokes and some Pepsis, and sometimes these drinks they just explode on you, and sometimes you just don't know how to deal with them, right? But all your kids are different in so many different ways, and I think it's important for us to have a relationship with them. It's important for us to know their names. It's important for us to know that, hey, you know what? Something is wrong. Let's hold off on the music right now, and let's have a conversation. Let's talk. I remember vaguely my very first year, or I remember very vividly my first year. We were trying to do a piece, and the room was just very dead, and it was very cold. And as much as I had planned for that day, I said, let's stop. Let's sit down and let's talk. And I'm glad that I was able to discern the room and to say something's wrong, because I could feel my kids' hearts because I knew them that way. And I thought the conversation was going to go on the lines of, yeah, I'm just sad, or da 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 da. And that day, I had never seen so many kids be so vulnerable. It was a combination of kids saying, I'm gay now, or they're coming out, or I haven't told my parents, or, I'm sad about this, or I hated that my mom. It had nothing to do with music. It had everything to do with how they were feeling. And I think that was my first time going, you know what, there might be times where I have to put my lesson plans to the side and allow my kids to just vent, just go. Here's a touchy subject, things that happened on the Capitol. I gave my kids 5 minutes to talk about, what are your thoughts? What are your opinions? I told them, I'm not going to speak. I don't want to give my opinion. And I never give my opinion. I want to hear what you think. And I got to hear so many kids just be vulnerable and to just say how they felt, to say, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. And I think that gives kids a chance to really be vulnerable in front of you and to kind of get a chance to know who they really are. And that goes back to the slide of really being in their world. When it says go into their worlds are it might not be our world. Their world might be totally different, but I think we have to go in and we have to enter into our kids' worlds. So when our kids want something, we have to go. We have to say, hey, you know what? Let me see what you do. Let me see how you interact. And I think that's really important for every teacher to have. If you notice that we have not really touched on music, I think because before we get to music, we have to get all of this together first. If we don't get all this together first, we can teach kids and we can maybe get them really good tone and they can be ready for contest, but we still don't know them and they still don't have that trust and that vulnerability that we need. So I really encourage everyone to really have relationship. Is it important for us to teach them? Absolutely. And coming from Texas, I am aware that when we go to UIL and we go to competition, we have to be ready. But I think it's also important to have the exact same care when we notice that our kids are hurting and they need us. So let us now talk about some strategies for the classroom. When I say strategies, I am referring to different things that we need. Can competition get in the way? That's a good question. I am not, so here in Missouri, especially right now for the pandemic, we are not able to really go any places and have those experiences. I want to be careful saying this, but honestly, I'm glad that I get a year of not having to push for that. And I get a year of just having my kids and we get to sing and we get to make music. We have been in, I have a program or a thing I'm working on called Soulful Solfege. And we've just been learning songs all on solfege and they're just loving it. And we don't really have cares in the world. We did a virtual concert. It was kind of cool. We're working on a Black History concert. If our kids get quarantined and they all go home, well, we just won't have it. It's kind of an up and down world. And that made me nervous at the beginning of the year. But now it's like, you know what? it's going to be okay. My kids are happy. My kids are here. My kids are well, stand over there. Don't cough on me, but my kids are here. And so I'm happy. And so can competition get in the way? I think it's important. I think you can have both, Andrew, but I think it is important to have both. I think when you only focus on music and you don't focus on relationship, I think you can have a hurting kid who can sight read really well, but they're still hurting. I would rather have a kid who is healing and can sight read versus you care nothing about them. You only want them for their musicality. And I think that's really important. So thank you for that question. I think that's important to know. And it's important to express that sometimes those things do feel like hindrances, but you can have both. Let's go to some strategies. Hope you guys are enjoying this. I really hope you are. I hope I'm not boring you too much. So strategy number one, I think it's important for you to ask your students what you want to learn. Ask your students what they want to learn. What goals do you have in mind? So at the beginning, actually after the second quarter, I did a survey with my kids and I asked them, actually, I take that back. At the beginning of the year, they always fill out a music sheet and I always ask them, what musical goals do you want to achieve? And I've heard things such as better tones. I want to sight read better. I want to rhythm read better. I want to blend with other people. And I think that's really important. They tell you what they want you to know if you ask them. I think it's important for teachers to get out of the habit of, I'm the teacher, they're the student, I'm going to teach this lesson and they're going to learn it. Yes, I also think that you should ask them what do they want, because if your kids want to learn how to sight read better and you only have repertoire plan, I think you can miss the kids. So I think it's really important to get your kids involved in your planning. If you really want to have an effective lesson plan, ask your kids. That can fill up your entire year with lessons. What do you want to know about before you leave this class? So these are some of the class questions that I asked, and these are the answers that I got, which I was actually not ready for. One of the general music kids in 8th grade, they said, I want to learn more about piano. We learned about the notes, the white notes on the piano, because we didn't have a lot of time. And they really liked that. They wanted to learn songs. And I was like, wow, I didn't think you cared that much. They didn't really show a lot of interest, but I learned they actually did. I was like, wow, so maybe next go around, I'm going to learn that. I heard some choir students say, I want to learn harder rhythmic meters. So I teach, 2/4 and 3/4 and 4/4. And sometimes I get into, 6/8 and 3/8. And they were like, we want to learn about some harder rhythms. And I'm like, okay. And that makes me go, well, now let me go back and replan how I think, because I now see kids want to learn more than what I'm giving. Here's a really cool story about Adele and New Edition and TLC. So I have an 8th grade general music class that I teach, and I always ask them, what artists would you like to learn about? And last year I had a student, I'm gonna call her a sprite. She was a sprite because she was just so nice, but then all of a sudden she would just shake and just go. Yeah, so she was a sprite, but bless her heart. And she would ask me, or she would never really pay attention in class. But one day I said, what artist would you like to learn about? And she said, I want to learn about Adele. And I said, okay, we're going to learn about Adele, but I want you to pay attention. And so I remember the day that I put Adele on the screen, and I remember her eyes just going, we're learning about Adele. And for those 2.5 days where she did not talk, she did not get up, she didn't roam around the room, she was listening. Now the other 362 days, like, she was up and doing stuff. But those 2 days, I had her in and focused because she saw that I'm learning about something, and that was something I contributed to the lesson. I think having students contribute to the lesson is really, really important. Somebody also wanted to learn about New Edition. I love New Edition, but I didn't know other kids even knew who they were. Another student wanted to learn about TLC. I love TLC, one of my favorite women vocal R&B groups from the 90s, but I had no idea. We were learning about other artists. Here's the last lesson, and I want to look at you for this one. This is funny. Africa by Toto. So my first year here at Reed Academy, I asked my kids said, hey, we want to be involved in the singing process. And this was before I had the understanding of kids should be aware of what we do. And they said, we want to learn Africa by Toto. And I was like, okay. And we went back to doing what we were doing. And they said it again. We want to learn Africa by Toto. And I was like, sure. All right, page 4, here we go. And the next day, they brought me all 52 students brought me a petition. It was all signed by them. And it said, Mr. Gibson, we want to learn Africa by Toto. And I said 3 times a charm. So I said, you know what? I think they want to learn maybe Africa by Toto. Cool. So I went out and I bought Africa by Toto. Now, what I was able to do is I said, now, if we're going to learn Africa by Toto, you have to be all the way engaged. So I took their challenge and I over-challenged them. If we're going to learn this, then you're going to put in the work for it. You're going to make sure that you know all the things. You're going to find all the parts. When we go into sectionals, you're going to be focused. You're going to do it. And they did an amazing job with it. That was when I realized, you know what? Kids should have a say-so in what they learn. Now, if they wanted to learn, I had one group say they wanted to learn Eric Whitaker's When David Heard. I said, well, no, we won't be doing that one. That's 16 parts and you can only sing in 3. But, maybe in 10 years, but no, we won't learn that one. But Africa by Toto, we can do that one. We can order that tonight. Cool. So I thought that was a really cool thing, asking your kids what you want. Here's strategy number 2. That I think is really important. Utilize various genres to educate and inspire your kids. Now, this sounds like a very basic thing, and most of you probably already do this. And again, as I said before, if this is something you already do, I don't want you to feel that this is, if you hear it again and you already do it, I want you to be encouraged that you're on the right path. If you don't do this, I don't want you to feel like, oh man, I'm messing up. These are all strategies that I'm still learning as I go. Having students, have students listen to various artists with genre stretching, while doing rhythm clapping, even with vocal warm-ups. So I know we learned for Christmas, All I Want for Christmas Is You, Mariah Carey. I use that as a warm-up during the Christmas season, and my kids always wanted to sing it. In addition, they always now want to sing one of the solfege warm-ups that I do, which is, I call it Waterfalls, and it's like a so fa mi re do. But they want to do it because it sounds just like a pop song, and they always want to sing songs they know. So I think it's important to do that. For my general music classes, a lot of times when we're learning rhythm and we're on the artist Michael Jackson, I will turn on the Michael Jackson song and we'll clap the rhythms to the Michael Jackson song. And so we're kind of infusing 2 different worlds together, which I think is really cool. Maybe you can pick a music artist each month for students to research. Even in middle school, even in high school, I think it's important for students to know where artists come from, because musical artists are not, a lot of them are not dead. Yes, you have the greats that are gone, Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, and but you still have some really cool artists that are alive, especially the artists they listen to. So Billie Eilish is 18, 19, is still alive. She can be researched. There are a lot of different artists that are out there, and I think that might excite them and get them to go, wow, I can research this person, especially if you ask them, do an artist of your choosing, which is point number 3, having students present a project on a musical artist and or genre of their choosing. They get to choose and they get to present it to the class, which I think is great. Lastly, for strategy 2, programming music that is different for a different experience. So in Springfield, Missouri, we had to do a presentation at the downtown square. And this, in 1906, that was the same time that they were still lynching African Americans. And so it was to honor the families of those 3 men who were lynched on the square. And so I needed a song that was really, really quick, but something that was different and that was not too boring. And so I programmed Michael Barrett's Tico Onotando, which was one, I think, I say this with all reverence, it was so simple and so easy to teach, but it made my kids' day that they were singing, 1, in 4-part harmony, 2, that they were singing in a language that they really had never sung before, and it just brought life at a very, very quick pace. So I think it's really, really important to know how to do that and how to get kids to sing something that's so quick, but so simple and so easy. Engage in deep conversations with students. So I think we talked about that a little earlier when we talked about dialogue. I think deep conversations is the key. I think we have got to talk to our students. So, I put a couple of things like Black History concerts or patriotic celebrations or holiday music. There are sometimes, and I've learned this, there are sometimes people don't just celebrate Christmas. It sounds very, very like, well, duh. I was unaware of that until I said, well, you know what? Some student told me, you know what? I don't celebrate Christmas. I celebrate this. I celebrate Kwanzaa. I celebrate holidays. My family does not celebrate Christmas. And so I had to learn how to change my wording around so that I do not come off or appeal to one group, but I come off to more groups, more people who do different things. I think that was great. I think also, with Read Academy, like I said, we have a lot of talk discussions. I'll pass around the talking cube after spraying it with Lysol, of course, for pandemic. But I pass around the talking cube, and we talk about different things. And one person gets to hold the cube, and they get to say how they feel. And of course, I have the rules of be respectful. Make sure that nobody is talking while other people are talking. And it's just been such a positive thing to see. Also, with the multicultural ensemble this year, the group is all women. It is 10 women, and we're doing a concert this semester called As Told by Them, from the view of the woman. And we have, at the beginning, the first rehearsal, we wrote down, what does it mean to be a woman? What is the power of a woman? Now, I'm not a woman, but I got to hear and I got to feel what these women were saying and how they were thinking. And I think deep conversations about that is such a key way to do that, which I think is great. So yes, I encourage you, talk to your kids more. They really have a lot to say if you allow them to say it. Strategy 4, involve students in their own learning process. This goes back to the topic we talked about earlier. So I had one student who spoke Spanish really well. And I thought, you know what? I need to give her a place so where if I do a Spanish piece, she can teach me the words to the Spanish piece. I don't have to just do it and say, oh, this girl knows Spanish, but I want to say, you know what? How about you come up and teach it to the class? I was informed that one of my students, I had no idea, but he does sign language because his father is deaf. And I said, you know what? Maybe one day you can come and you can teach us some sign language. Just teach us little things. That might be really cool. Have your students from a different country talk about their background and experiences. I have one student in an intervention class here at Read Academy who came from South Africa. And I'm like, I want to know more about that. I got a chance to visit that, but I don't know the world that you were in. Here's the last strategy I have is poll your students by asking, if you could teach the class one unique thing, what would it be? And that's really cool. And I'm actually going to try that with my kids pretty soon and see what things they would teach. And then I have to execute it and go and actually let them teach. I think execution is really important when it comes to strategies. It's not just about, I want them to do this, but I have to actually execute it and follow through with it. And my last strategy is receive feedback from your students. Now, this is a really difficult one. And I'm actually going to pull up a list that my kids sent to me. This is my first year teaching. I asked my kids for some feedback. They always take a survey. I said, what did you learn in choir? What did you like about choir? What did you like about your teacher? What would you change about your teacher? What would you change about your experience in class? And one thing that I think really shocked me is I have a list. I'm actually going to move my screen. There's a list right here that I actually hung on my wall. These are all the things that my kids told me. It's about maybe 25 different points that I have. And some of them, I'm going to read some of them out loud. One of them was, don't pick favorites. And that made me go, ouch. Oh, because I didn't know that's what I was doing. But my kids, very honestly and very lovingly said, you pick favorites a lot. And that made me go, and they said it 5 times, 5 different people. I said, well, maybe I do. That's something I need to change. Something else people said, they said, let's see, communicate better. These are 7th graders and 8th graders, and that kind of hurt my feelings. But they were honest because I asked, and I had to be in a vulnerable place of, you know what, I asked you, so I need to be able to do that. So now I have to work on my communication. This has been on my wall since my first year. This is my 3rd year here. And I haven't forgotten these because I asked them. Somebody said, recognize people more. I said, okay, I need to start calling people out. There's some people who said, be more strict. I said, okay, you want more strict? Cool. Now, this is from my advanced class. Some of my other classes said, can we just play around and do nothing? I'm like, we won't do that one, but I'm listening to your different observations. And so I think getting feedback from your students is very, very important. you are going, as someone said earlier, you're going to get so many different things that of diversity when you get to hear what your kids feel, how they see things. You may get something that's totally different. I would have never thought that my kids would say, we want to learn harder rhythms and we need you to be more strict. Oh, that never crossed my mind to hear that. But when I heard it, that made me realize, okay, I can step it up here because my kids are vulnerable enough to tell me what they want. And I think that's really, really important. I'm going to pause there really quick. I want to make sure we're good on time, Chris.
Yeah, we're supposed to stop at about 11:20. I think you're quite near the end of your presentation.
I am. I only have what two more slides. One is final thoughts. One is some repertoire choices that I'd love to share with you. But I did want to open up for questions. I don't want to take too much of your time. So sorry about that. I got excited. Thanks for letting me speak.
You're doing great, Robert. I really, one of the things that struck me whenever you and I were brainstorming in the fall was the vulnerability that you're talking about. We did get a call for repertoire, so we'll skip on there in a second. But that level of vulnerability to ask your students, it's not just like the final course evaluation. You ask your students directly, what can I do better for you? And we're finding, I think, so much that diversity that matters in the classroom comes from that individual voice, regardless of what the choir looks like when you put them on stage. So that vulnerability to ask your students kind of point blank, how am I failing you right now, really opens up a good line for teachers. So yeah, call for repertoire. You want to go for it?
Yeah, sure. I want to say one more thing towards that. I should show the slide. One of my final thoughts, and you'll get the slide so you can just read these. But one of the I was going to say is diversity is a multifaceted concept that should be focused on. And I think if we focus more on the experience, yes, if we have multiple people in our choir from various races, that is awesome, and that is never frowned upon. If you don't, that does not mean that we are automatically no longer diverse. I think that we have to find diversity in a different way. Thinking about the different tiers, diversity is not just about the look or the color. It's about the experience and how they feel. So again, thank you again, guys, for letting me be here. Here are a couple of repertoire choices. So as I said, I am published with Walton Music as well as Alfred. It just got published with Alfred Music a couple of months ago, which I'm super excited for. And so that is where Lovely Day comes from. We Shall Overcome, Amazing Grace, and This Light of Mine are actually with Walton Music on their website, which I think are really lovely pieces. So feel free to peruse over those or take a listen, and I hope you guys enjoy those. In addition, here's some other pieces that I have. Lord Send Your Spirit, which is by Raymond Wise, I believe at Indiana University. Wonderful piece, gospel piece. I think it's great. We Remember Them is by Susan Labar, who is a female composer in Springfield. Just a wonderful soul and just a wonderful person to be around. If you've never heard of her, she's awesome. Celebra is this. It's rhythmic and it's Spanish text. It's one of the coolest pieces I've ever heard, and hopefully I'll be able to do this with my kids this year. As I talked about earlier, Tico Onotando, Michael Baird, South African music. I think South African music is so attainable because it's so simple, yet you get to have so many different discussions about text and about the different languages. There are 11 different languages in South Africa. I've Been in the Storm, which is arranged by Brian Tate. We did this last year with my Reed Academy singers. And it's very simple, but so profound. And this was the conversation we got to have about what does this mean? What does this mean? And how does it relate to Black history, which I thought was amazing. Last but not least, I Will Be the Light by Gerald Custer. I heard this song a couple of years ago, and oh man, it just took me. It was a very simple piece, but it was so profound, and it just spoke to me. I got a chance to do it with a district choir a couple of years ago, and it was just phenomenal. So those are the pieces. And as I said, I'll email these slides to whoever I need to, and in hopes that you can go and look back. And I didn't get a chance to do all the final comments, but that is fine. I've also left my contact information there. So if you ever have any questions or comments, or just want to say hello, or I would love to share any advice that I have. Again, I am No expert. I have all the answers. I'm somebody who has a different experience, and I am thankful that you've allowed me to share my thoughts with you. Thank you again, Chris, for having me. And yes, that would be in Pittsburgh. That would be awesome.
Thank you, Robert. It's been great to hear from you. Do you want to put your contact information in the chat right here?
You know what? Sure, I can do that right
That'd be
now.
great. Okay, folks, well, we've got, I think, about 11:20, so feel free to take 5 minutes, and Angie Casper's here with us already, but we'll start with Angie at 11:25. Thanks.